Ava Bazzi, a woman in her early 30s, has recently returned to Tehran with her family after several years in London. The transition has been challenging, especially amidst the tense political climate in Iran. On a warm autumn morning, she and her 4-year-old daughter, Yasmin, cross Keshavarz Boulevard on their way to school. Ava, dressed in colorful yet modest attire compliant with Iranian law, reflects on how much Tehran has changed since her youth. Once a vibrant and beautiful city, parts of it now feel diminished under the weight of authoritarian control and societal decay. Life in Tehran is especially precarious for women and girls, as Ava is painfully aware. Recent events have left the entire nation, and Ava herself, on edge. The death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini while in the custody of the morality police has sparked widespread protests. Demonstrators demand freedom and justice, but the regime has responded with brutal crackdowns. The senseless deaths of other young girls, like 16-year-olds Nika Shakarami, Serena Esmailzadeh, and Azra Panahi, have intensified Ava's fears. Though Yasmin is only in pre-kindergarten, Ava feels the constant weight of worry for her daughter's safety. As Ava drops Yasmin off at her school, a place adjacent to a girls' high school that has also become a target of police repression, she notices the tense atmosphere among the staff and students. Yasmin's reluctance to enter the school tugs at her heart, but Ava reassures her daughter, encouraging her to dream big and aspire to be anything she wants: a doctor, an astronaut, or even a lawyer. With a heavy heart, Ava leaves Yasmin in the care of her teacher and heads toward the local bazaar to shop for groceries. On her way, Ava encounters a large demonstration blocking the streets. Thousands of women and men have gathered, chanting the now famous slogan, Zan, Zendegi, Azadi, women, life, freedom. Many women boldly remove their headscarves, throwing them into fires as acts of defiance. Others cut their hair in public, a poignant protest against the regime's oppressive laws and a tribute to Mahsa Amini. Though Ava deeply sympathizes with the protesters and their cause, she chooses not to join them. The streets are not her chosen battleground, and her focus remains on protecting her family. Returning to her apartment, Ava watches the demonstration from her window while removing her headscarf. Her family's home is a modern, spacious unit, a refuge from the turmoil outside. Ava has left her cell phone locked in a drawer, a precaution against the morality police, who have been known to stop women and search their phones for incriminating evidence. She retrieves the device to check for updates and learns from a network of women activists about the alarming developments of the day. One text message details the indictment of 315 protesters, 4 of whom have been labeled Moharb, or enemies of God. Ava knows the gravity of this accusation. It carries the death penalty under Shiite Islamic law. Another message informs her of a school raid in District 6, close to Yasmin's school. Though the sender likely refers to the nearby high school, Ava cannot ignore the possibility that Yasmin could be caught in the crossfire. Her maternal instincts kick in, and she rushes out of the apartment to retrieve her daughter. The streets are chaotic as Ava navigates through the growing protest. Tear gas hangs in the air, and gunshots ring out, heightening the sense of danger. She arrives at the school, where other worried mothers have also gathered to collect their daughters. The schoolmaster, sympathetic to the parents' concerns, begins releasing the children. When Ava sees Yasmin, she calls out to her, and the little girl runs into her arms. Despite the momentary relief of having her daughter safe, Ava knows they are still far from secure. With protests spreading and the situation growing more volatile, Ava decides to head to her husband Farid's office, which is closer than their apartment. Farid, a businessman who once owned boutique hotels catering to international travelers, has struggled to rebuild his career after the family was forced to leave London due to visa issues and the economic fallout of COVID-19. Ava believes his office will offer a temporary safe haven. As they approach the office, they encounter barricades and heavily armed members of the morality police. The crowd becomes increasingly frantic, and Yasmin, exhausted and terrified, cannot run any farther. Gunshots and explosions scatter the demonstrators, creating a stampede. Ava carries Yasmin, running as best she can toward their apartment. Amid the chaos, Ava is stopped by 2 officers. They demand to know why her headscarf is missing, accusing her of deliberately removing it in protest. Ava explains that it must have fallen off while she was running. The officers do not believe her and accuse her of cutting her hair in defiance of the regime. Ava denies this, pleading with them to understand that she obeys the laws and had no intention of breaking them. Her protests fall on deaf ears. One of the officers strikes Ava with his baton, and they handcuff her despite her desperate pleas. They demand the address of her husband's office, which she reluctantly provides. The officers decide to separate Ava from Yasmin, sending the little girl to her father while arresting Ava. Yasmin cries out for her mother as they are forcibly pulled apart. Ava, now one of many detainees, is shoved into the back of a police van. She watches helplessly as Yasmin disappears into a police car. The streets blur around her as the van doors slam shut, leaving Ava to face an uncertain and terrifying fate. In this harrowing moment, Ava's story captures the fear, resilience, and quiet defiance of countless women in Iran who navigate the dangers of an oppressive regime while trying to protect their families. Her love for her daughter drives her every decision, even as the world around them grows increasingly hostile. Ava's arrest underscores the personal cost of systemic repression, as well as the bravery of those who dare to resist, even in the smallest ways. Jack Swyteck and his wife, Andy Henning, were at a breaking point in their marriage, and the counseling session with Dr. Stanger was their last attempt to salvage things. The tension between them had been building for years, and it had reached a critical juncture. Dr. Stanger, a marriage counselor, sat behind an ultra-modern glass desk and carefully analyzed the couple's dynamics. The atmosphere in the room was charged with unspoken words and emotions. Dr. Stanger's first observation was stark. "You are experiencing mirror image syndrome." "What does that mean?" Jack asked, confusion evident on his face. Dr. Stanger explained that mirror image syndrome referred to the situation where both partners see the same reality but interpret it differently, with each viewing the other as unreasonable. This hit home for Jack, who had been accustomed to dealing with legal problems in his role as a criminal defense attorney. He had tried to explain to Andy, an FBI agent, that their opposing careers were always going to cause friction. In his eyes, they were simply living life in a way that worked for him. But Andy's frustration was growing, as her role in the FBI continually clashed with Jack's work defending accused criminals. Andy spoke up, her voice laced with sarcasm and frustration. "Actually, it is. Our life for the last 9 years has been doing things Jack's way. I've lost count of the number of times his work as a criminal defense lawyer, Jack corrected her, has caused me professional embarrassment at the bureau," she finished. Andy's point was clear. Her work was focused on upholding the law and putting criminals behind bars, while Jack's work involved defending those very criminals. The stark contrast in their missions had created a rift between them, one that Andy was struggling to understand and accept. She had long put her career as an FBI agent first, but now she was questioning why she always had to be the one to adjust for the sake of their marriage. "What is so unreasonable about asking you to try things my way?" Andy questioned. "I want to know why I have to compromise my career for us to be happy." Jack, still stuck in his own perspective, responded, "Because it's not reasonable to ask me to stop doing what I do best. I can't suddenly slap my mug on billboards and start asking, 'Have you been injured in an accident?'" Dr. Stanger intervened, clarifying Andy's perspective. "Her point is more than that. She's not asking you to abandon your profession entirely, Jack. But there are other ways you can practice law that don't conflict with her role in the FBI." The counselor's words began to sink in, and Jack, although resistant, realized that maybe there was more to Andy's frustration than he had allowed himself to acknowledge. Dr. Stanger continued, suggesting that both of them needed to break free from the self-imposed rule they had been living by. For years, Andy and Jack had followed a strict rule. Andy couldn't discuss her active investigations, and Jack couldn't talk about his ongoing criminal cases. Both feared that revealing too much could endanger their respective careers. Dr. Stanger addressed the issue directly, saying, "The rule is not healthy. It's unreasonable to live like this when you both have demanding, high-stakes careers. It's a form of self-muzzling, and I honestly don't know how you've stayed together this long." Andy's voice softened as she considered Dr. Stanger's advice. "I've been willing to make compromises, but why does it always have to be me? Why am I the one who has to change?" Jack, feeling cornered by Andy's words, responded sharply, "Why do either of us have to change? We've made it this far." But Dr. Stanger wasn't buying it. She pointed out that the real issue was not about changing careers or avoiding conflicts of interest. It was about the emotional distance between them caused by their unwillingness to let go of the rule. Jack and Andy's lack of communication was poisoning their relationship, leaving both feeling unfulfilled and increasingly resentful. Jack, ever the pragmatist, finally relented. "I suppose that's better than dropping my career altogether." His voice held a mixture of resignation and frustration. But Andy wasn't so easily satisfied. "I want you to cut back on your criminal defense work." "Not just a little, Jack. A lot." The room fell into silence as the weight of Andy's demand hung in the air. Jack's mind raced. His identity as a criminal defense lawyer was deeply ingrained in him. He couldn't imagine walking away from the work that had defined his career for years. But Andy's eyes were fixed on him, unwavering, waiting for his response. Dr. Stanger, sensing a breakthrough, gently prodded Jack. "Well, Jack, it seems the ball is in your court. Are you willing to make this change for the sake of your marriage?" Jack inhaled deeply, trying to suppress the anxiety that surged within him. After a moment of hesitation, he made his decision. "I'll drop the rule," he said, his voice a little more certain. "And I'll cut back on my criminal defense work. A lot." The words felt like a weight lifting off his chest, though he still felt conflicted. Later that evening, Jack sat alone on the dock behind their home. The moonlight reflected on the black waters of Biscayne Bay, and he stared out, lost in thought. His decision had been a difficult one. His work in criminal defense had been the driving force in his life for years. But now, things were different. He had promised Andy he would reduce his caseload. He had agreed to something that felt like it would change the very essence of who he was. His cell phone rang, breaking his thoughts. It was his father, Harry Swyteck, a former governor of Florida who had served 2 terms in office. Jack answered the call, and his father's words were direct. "I hear you're finally coming over from the dark side," Harry said, referring to Jack's decision to reduce his criminal defense work. Jack's response was laced with a hint of sarcasm. "You talked to Andy?" "I did. She told me you're cutting back on your criminal practice." Way back, Jack stepped to the edge of the dock, the waves crashing below him. His mind raced with the implications of his choices. Harry, sensing his son's reluctance, pressed on. "I want to make this easier for you," Harry said. "I have a case for you." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What kind of case?" "It's a civil case," Harry replied. "Sounds like you're on Andy's side," Jack remarked, his tone skeptical. "I'm not on anybody's side," Harry said. "It's pro bono. And the stakes are higher than in any criminal case you've ever handled." Jack was taken aback. "Higher stakes than my death penalty cases?" "Higher," Harry affirmed. Jack was intrigued, despite his reservations. "Okay, what's the case?" Harry explained that the case involved 2 Iranian citizens, John Doe versus Jane Doe, and had been filed under seal due to secrecy concerns. The U.S. State Department had requested that the case be kept confidential, and the parties involved were political hot potatoes in U.S.-Iranian relations. It wasn't a typical case, but the stakes were undeniably high. Jack, now fully engaged, asked, "Why me?" Harry revealed that Myra Weiss, his former legal counsel, needed a top-notch Miami trial lawyer for the case. The complexity of the matter required someone capable of navigating not just legal intricacies but political and diplomatic pressures. After a long pause, Jack agreed. "I'll pay Myra a visit." As Jack hung up the phone, he realized that his life was about to change. He was stepping into a case that could redefine his career and, potentially, his marriage. But as he gazed out over the bay, the decision felt like the first step toward something new, a path where he could balance his work and his marriage, if only he could figure out how.